and you see just how far back we're sliding in this real moment. It's shameful. Look, this is about who we are and who they are. And when we see them kidnap our neighbors, we don't go, well, what does the polling tell us? And also because if we're fighting back, then fight all the way back. I get asked all the time, what's next for you? And
we'll
what's
get
next
to
for
that. Don't spoil it for me. All right. Assemblyman Isaac Bryan, welcome to the opposition. It's great to meet you.
It's really great to meet you. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Let's jump right on in. So you have been a legislator here in California for 4 years.
Yeah.
You've already served as majority leader. You are currently the vice chair of the California Legislative Black Caucus. And earlier this summer, you were thrown into the national spotlight when California chose to fight back against Trump's gerrymandering scheme.
The American people hate gerrymandering. Yes, we do, and we absolutely should. That's not what this is about. This is about whether we will let the authoritarian in the White House break our democracy while we sit silent, while we take a high road that doesn't exist anymore. Now isn't that moment. Now is the time to square up and defend all that we deserve, all that we've built, all that makes this country truly great.
What has it felt like to be sort of thrown into the middle of the fight, to have California be called on to be like the opposition to Trump?
Yeah, it's a familiar place for us here in California, and it's also not my first time being opposition, and not just to Trump, but to systems of oppression or systems of harm. I think the first time I was thrown into a national conversation was in 2020. Led some of the major marches here in Los Angeles in response to the murder of George Floyd. Ran a ballot measure committee here in LA County. It was Measure J then. 2020's version of Prop 50, but it called for 10% of LA County's unrestricted budget to go towards alternatives to incarceration, community investments, youth investments, and affordable housing, the things that community really needed, and not just one time, but in perpetuity. And we passed that measure back in 2020 with 2.1 million votes or something like that. And so I've been active for a really long time, organizing, pushing back against the things that I believe are harmful and promoting the things that I believe promote well-being. And in this moment, the thing that is harmful is the Trump administration. Mm-hmm. And the thing we can do to increase well-being is to push back against it, fight against it, stand in the way, and move towards prosperity and opportunity every chance we can.
Introducing that ballot measure, did that cultivate the feeling for you that you could be an effective legislator? Because I and this is supposed to be later in the conversation, but I'm curious sort of what it's like stepping from community organizer, activist into being in the room.
It was the first time I won something on a ballot. And I think when you run a campaign, that kind of a campaign, I'd run many community campaigns with incredible organizers across Los Angeles. We stopped the construction of a women's jail facility. We pushed school police off of LAUSD campuses and divested $25 million from school police to start the Black Student Achievement Program in LAUSD. We started a youth development department in LA County. So we led grassroots campaigns. But until you're actually on the ballot and you're running a political campaign, you have no idea whether those skills can translate to that arena. And so passing Measure J in 2020 was huge for me. That happened in November. I launched my campaign for the Assembly a month later.
You know, I want to talk a little bit about you. You said on CNN this summer, when they go low, we squabble up. Where does that, you explained sort of how you have fought and tried to change the system, but where does that fight come from for you personally? Because I know you grew up in foster care.
Yeah.
You struggled with school as a kid. You got an F- once, but then you ended up at UCLA graduating top of your class in your master's program. So if you can summarize for me a little bit sort of what it's like building up that sort of fight.
Yeah, I think I've been scrapping since I was a kid.
Yeah.
Right? The reason I failed middle school is because I was suspended 6 or 7 times for getting into fights. And that's not a great way to be as a child. But I also don't think you should just blame children for the reason that they are struggling to figure out how to handle stress and anxiety and contention with their peers. But a little bit of that fight stays in you. And it also taught me to deeply resent bullies or folks who try to talk down to other folks. And I think most of the times I've ever been in a fight in my life, it was either in defense of somebody else or in the face of tremendous disrespect. And I don't think there's anything more disrespectful in this moment than to look at a starving family and cut their SNAP benefits, to look at somebody who's dying and deny them health care. to look at struggling students and force them to increase their unit load in order to be considered full-time and eligible for FAFSA. Those kinds of things are harmful. They're rooted in the tactics of a bully. They're not strength. It's a masquerade for the weakness coming out of this administration, and I think we have to call that out, especially when they wrap it in the manosphere and pretend like they are the tough guys, right? What is tough is the single mother working 2 or 3 jobs, living in a city that she can't afford to live in, right? What's tough is kids like in my family where there were 12, 13 of us sharing clothes, people trying to figure out how they get new backpacks and new school clothes for the first day of school, how they get Christmas presents at the end of the year. That's tough. What's not tough is the billionaire in the White House or anybody around him who believes that this entire country should work for them and them alone.
And how does that sort of upbringing and the things that you've experienced or things that you witness other people experience, how does that dictate or influence the way that you legislate and the things that you decide to focus on outside of Trump, just in general, like you as a member?
I think working to end poverty and alleviate poverty is important. I think understanding that children in the child welfare system are there at no fault of their own, like ever, and that most of those outcomes are now predictable for those young people if we don't intervene. You're more likely to do poor in school. You're more likely to end up incarcerated as a youth. You're more likely to live in economic stagnation. You're less likely to attend higher education. You're more likely to go to prison. We know all of these things. And if we know all of these things, then we have a duty and a responsibility to create policies and institutions and interventions that produce better life outcomes for the folks who are struggling right now. That, to me, is the role of government. And that is the role of elected officials. And it's why I ran.
And I've heard people say before when they run for office and they finally make it to office or something, and I heard you describe, I believe, the new speaker, if I'm correct, in a recent interview, I heard you describe his upbringing. He grew up in farming housing, I believe.
Farm worker housing.
So I remember you describing where he's ascended to and saying he shouldn't be here. And you say shouldn't because like the way that the system is built, he shouldn't be here. But shouldn't we have more working class people in government who understand the needs of the people versus having people who have never had to walk a mile in our shoes?
Absolutely. What was asinine to me and crazy to me is when I got to the legislature, I co-founded the Renters Caucus. And that was in 2023.
Mm-hmm.
There are 17 million Californians who are paying rent. The rent has been too damn high for a long time. And in that moment, there were only 5 of us in the legislature who were renters.
Who rents? Wow.
Who were renters. We had
and how many members are in the legislature?
120. We had more landlords
wow.
than renters.
Oh
and
my
it
God.
just reminded me how out of touch sometimes our civic institutions are from the real struggles of everyday people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not because these jobs are themselves glamorous, but in order to take the time off to run for office, you need a certain financial positioning to make that feasible. What worked out for me is that I ran in the middle of the pandemic. So my first campaign was largely digital until the very end where we got to go outside. And that's when I found out how many people actually had my back.
Mm-hmm.
And we knocked on doors for maybe 2 or 3 weeks.
And you won your primary by a huge margin. And then ever since then, you've won your primary at about 85 or 86%. And you've won both the general elections for re-election at 80%. So
yeah, we've had the highest win margin in the state for several elections. But the first one was special because there were 6 Democrats in that field.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to go to Sacramento right out of the primary, you had to get over 50%. People told me it was statistically impossible with 6 Democrats to pull over 50%. And we did. And so I'm grateful to the community who's had my back. And hopefully folks are still very proud to see us work.
yeah. And I think, the thing that keeps us in this mindset where we should be electing rich and affluent people is that thing that, like, I'm sure you and I both grew up with, where, like, people who had money or who were worth something, like, automatically deserved your respect as a kid, or you felt inferior to them. It's that thing where, like, you walk into a store and because you didn't buy anything, when you leave, you feel guilty even though you didn't do anything, but it's because, people look down on you. And so I feel like we really need to change that narrative because we've seen the most fight come from people who have come from nothing,
Right.
like you. And so going back really quickly to community organizers, should that be or people who are just active in their communities, should that be a prerequisite for people who decide to run for office? Like, we look back at historic leaders, look at John Lewis,
Yeah.
Bernie Sanders. I mean, I have opinions about whether or not he's been an effective member of the Senate,
Sure.
but he's been a community organizer. He's been in the streets, and he got his head bashed in for trying to fight for what's right. And then we see people who have just been in suits their whole life.
I think the best person to represent a community is who should represent that community. And in my mind, you can't effectively represent a community you haven't organized in. I would like to see less nepotism and more new energy, right? More folks who can show up to their county meeting, their school board meeting, their city council meeting with tens and 20 and dozens and hundreds of people to speak out against the things that are harmful and speak for the things that are helpful. To me, that's the signal that person should be elected to represent us, not somebody who was born in and believed that elected office is the career path they should choose. I don't believe this is a career that I've chosen. I think it's what the people have asked me to do in this moment. I get asked all the time, "What's next for you?" And
we'll
what's
get
next
to
for
that. Don't spoil it for me. All right, so let's talk a little bit about Prop 50. When you got here, we said it's been a good week. When we're recording this, Prop 50 passed 2 days ago. So Prop 50 just passed. I want to know a little bit about what it felt like to see those results come in and see that there was an overwhelming support for this fight against gerrymandering to take back the state.
I was elated. I was so excited because when we started this campaign, I remember talking to the governor, at the first press conference at his mansion. We had Texas legislators there who had been holding out in Texas under criminal threat, right, and daily fines. And they essentially told us, "We'll go back to Texas if you promise to step up." And we left that lunch and we said, "We're going to step up." And we went downstairs and we went in front of the press and we announced that we were going to do this and we were going to put this on the ballot. And immediately some polling was done that told us 2/3 of Californians will not vote for this. And we said, okay, we've got our work cut out for us. We've got to change a lot of hearts and minds. We've got to remind folks what's at stake. And we've got to help people find their own power again. We felt so disempowered under this administration. That is what they've tried to do to us. So to see California step up and show out in this kind of way, no greater feeling. And I knew it was going to happen when I saw the lines, the polling lines in Culver City and everywhere else across my district and across the state. This is a special election in an off year. Nobody should have showed up, but the people showed up and they showed out.
Yeah. And, exit data that you sent me this morning shows that Black men were the most consistent supporters of Prop 50. What kind of message do you think that sends?
First of all, damn right, brothers. Good job showing up. Because after the Trump election, it's crazy. If Black people voted for Kamala over 80%, Black men and Black women, the most consistent voting bloc for the Democratic base for 3 generations now. But if Black men are not at 85%, then we believe that we're losing ground, or at least that's what we're told as Black men. And when Trump was elected and the margin for Black men was just slightly less than it had been in previous years, we were told that Black men were deflecting from the party. They put a bunch of surrogates out in front of us. They put Amber Rose in front of us. They put a bunch of folks in front of us to tell us that the culture was shifting. The culture was going MAGA. Brothers were going MAGA. So to see us hold down California like this, to truly squabble up and come out 91% for Prop 50, I'm damn proud. And I think it's a good sign for the Democratic Party, but it's a good sign for democracy. When Black folks are engaged, both Black men and Black women, the moral clarity we need to navigate tough times is there.
Yeah. How much does Kendrick Lamar influence your politics?
Just less than Nipsey Hussle.
Okay, all right. After Texas passed their gerrymandered maps, you gave remarks on the floor here, and you made a historical reference that kind of blew me away. I want to read it for those who may not have seen it.
After those maps in Texas are approved, a Latino voice in Texas is worth 1/3 of the representation as a white voice. A Black voter in Texas is worth 1/5 of the representation of a white voter in Texas. I didn't say 3/5. There was no compromise. I said 1/5. That is the kind of gerrymandering, that is the kind of theft that they are perpetuating.
You said that with these new maps, a Latino voice in Texas is now worth 1/3 of the representation as a white voice. A black voter in Texas is worth 1/5 of the representation of a white voter in Texas. I didn't say 3/5. There was no compromise. I said 1/5. Clearly, you're referring to the 3/5 compromise of 1787.
Yeah.
How does it feel to see parts of the country regress so far back that we are beyond the 1700s?
It's shameful.
Yeah.
It is absolutely shameful. I spent some time this year. I took a dozen of my colleagues, 20 legislators actually, to Alabama to see Bryan Stevenson's lynching memorial that he established down there, and go to Selma, go to Montgomery, and walk the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and to have conversations with living civil rights leaders. In fact, we sat down with the brother who used to cut Martin Luther King Jr.'s hair. He's still with us today. Whenever he came to Montgomery, this brother would cut his hair. And he had his poll test from 1954 that he had been carrying all these years. And he had us take the poll test there. And I have a master's in public policy from UCLA. I failed the poll test. And it's not because I'm not well trained. It's because you were not supposed to be able to pass this test. There would be questions like, how many jelly beans are in this jar? But as you're walking through this museum and you're walking through the living history that still exists, and you see just how far back we're sliding in this real moment, it's shameful, and it's scary. I don't want to spend my lifetime getting us back to where we were just a few years ago. There are so many people who deserve for us to make progress, for us to improve the conditions of life, for us to provide greater stability for struggling families, for us to make healthcare a human right and housing a human right, and really center everyday people in our policymaking. We don't have time to fight the racist, bigoted, homophobic, sexist battles of the past. We've got too much on the line and too much at stake, but here we are. And this last election knocked me back just a little bit, but it didn't knock me down. You know, we've got to stand up in this moment. We've got to organize, and we've got to push back.
And I think, people are sort of struggling to find their voice. I think people are struggling with figuring out how to push back, and you have been consistent in trying to do that. And looking at Texas and looking at the gerrymandered maps, I see a lot of times online people will say things like, "Well, Texas voted for Greg Abbott, so they deserve whatever they get," or like, "Why do black folks still live in Mississippi? Why do black folks still live in Texas?" And I think it's really easy to look, and same with Latinos, and I think it's really easy to overlook the ancestral connections that people have to these places, and we sort of blame them for where it is that they are. How does it feel to sort of see those conversations about black and brown folks in other parts of the country who maybe, because as someone who does this work, that they are having their voices taken from them,
Right.
that even if they show up to vote against Greg Abbott, he'll still win because of things like this that now are part of the national conversation. But for a long time, people were just like, black and Latino voters just aren't showing up, or if they are, they're voting for the Republicans or something.
Yeah, I think you've got to meet people where they are. And that means going to the South sometimes. That means having everyday conversations with people in these communities. You might wonder, why do black folks still live in Mississippi? Talk to black people in Mississippi. You'll find out there's so much of their identity, right? Their place and space and belonging is in these places. And who are we to tell people that they should give up a central part of who they are? It's part of the conversations around push out and gentrification here in South Central. Why don't black folks just move to the Inland Empire, up to Lancaster and Palmdale, or out to Arizona? It's like, because when you think of Crenshaw and you think of Inglewood and you think of Watts and Compton, what do you think about, right? These are black and brown strongholds, historic black communities. These are our homes and our places. And I think the same is true everywhere else around the country. The fact that they're losing their political voice because of racist gerrymandering and political targeting by the Trump administration is why we have to stand with them, not question why they are not better organized, but ask how we can help. How can we step in? And in this moment, Texas was very clear to us here in California. You can help by passing Prop 50. You can offset the harm that's coming out of here, and we would deeply appreciate it.
You mentioned your trip to Selma. While you were in Selma, I know that is when Governor Newsom here in California signed a reparation bill.
Yeah.
He was forming
An agency.
Yes, he was forming a reparations agency here in the state. And that is when he also vetoed 5 reparation bills, including your bill,
Yeah.
which would have given colleges and universities here in the state of California the option to give descendants of slaves preferential acceptance
That's
into
right.
schools, into institutions of higher education that for so long has shut Black people out. Historically, you have maintained that Governor Gavin Newsom is a good person with
Yeah.
a good heart who made a political miscalculation.
Yeah.
It's been a few weeks now. Do you have any idea why he made the decision that he made?
I don't. I know I talked to him before he made the decision and told him how important it was to me, how important it was to Black folks who had been organizing. Hundreds of folks came to the Capitol, every committee hearing. 200 people went to his office once the bill went to the governor's office. He knew that this had national implications and legal implications, and a lot of folks who were counting on it. And so I was deeply disappointed. To be fair, I put 13 bills on his desk. He signed 12 of them. But the one that you didn't sign was meaningful.
Personal.
Yeah, meaningful to me, meaningful to a lot of folks, meaningful for many cultural reasons, meaningful to the Black Caucus, and could lay a foundation for future work that would be at the benefit of the descendants of those who were enslaved in this country. But I don't think that makes the governor a bad person.
Mm-hmm.
I think it is because I know he's not. I know he cares deeply. I know that they waited till the last day to tell me because it was such a contentious conversation in some room that I don't think a Black person was in. But a decision ultimately was made, and we just have to continue to move forward. A number of the other important bills that we put on his desk, he signed enthusiastically, like increasing the wages of incarcerated firefighters, eliminating clean record agreements for police officers with misconduct so they can no longer sign a non-disclosure agreement on the way out of a department that hides their misconduct. He signed legislation that would provide free dental and vision care for unhoused youth in our schools. We put a lot of good stuff on his desk, and he stepped into it. But on those particular priorities of the Legislative Black Caucus, he let us down, and we're looking to call him in. I always believe you call in before you call out, and have a conversation about how we make this next year powerful and meaningful.
Yeah. And to be clear for folks who listen to this, and I think after so much time, after so much disappointment, an inability or a reluctance to deliver for Black people themselves have also become part of the conversation where they're like, well, it's too good to be true, or it shouldn't happen, or we have other things to worry about now. And I hate to see that.
Yeah.
To be clear for folks, this bill, while it was being written, underwent scrutiny. And you folks let the governor know that this bill was not in violation of the Constitution.
Correct.
It was not anything. It didn't go against the Supreme Court's decision on affirmative action, but it was in a roundabout way to find the solution.
Correct.
For Black students to be able to have access to college.
Right.
And it didn't force colleges. It gave them the option to do this.
Right.
Yeah.
The best excuse that I got was that, maybe there was some concerns around the legal liability to the universities if they were sued on this by the Trump administration, which is why his veto message was so strange, basically telling the universities to just go ahead and do it. The reason the state should do this is to provide cover for the universities. We expect a legal challenge because the racists can't help themselves.
Mm-hmm.
If you do something for descendants of American chattel slavery,
Edward Bloom is listening to this right now somewhere.
you know what I mean?
he's hiding in the ceiling.
He's going to sue your podcast for even talking about doing something good for descendants of American slavery. And I think this was a missed moment. It was a missed moment. Yeah. And, it was hurtful in some ways because of what's at stake. And also because if we're fighting back, then fight all the way back. Fight back for Black folks too. You were already fighting at our universities. I'm a proud UCLA alum, and they're being extorted for $1 billion from the federal government, and we've got to stand with them. But fight all the way. Fight for everybody. Immigration enforcement is very, very popular in certain parts of the country, and when we see them kidnap our neighbors here in the middle of Los Angeles, another place in California, we don't go, well, what does the polling tell us? What is our liability if we step in? What is the risk? You step in and you say it's wrong. Let them go. Let folks go. Quit lying. Follow the legal process. Give folks There's civil rights. Those are afforded to everybody, regardless of your documented status. You deserve legal representation. You need a warrant to come and get me. All of these things. We step in. We don't look at the polling first, see which way the wind is blowing, and then make a decision. And I think when it comes to issues for black folks, sometimes that's what we do. But hopefully, if you're looking at which way the wind is blowing right now, you're seeing that black men and black women are still holding this party strong and deserve to be talked to, listened to, and respected.
But a lot of times, the people who are 10 toes down for the party, and this is where I start to criticize people, the people who want to defend the party, who want to defend candidates like Kamala Harris, who in my opinion was not a good candidate. Kamala Harris has never been a good candidate. She's a great person, great leader, very highly qualified presidential but like the art of running a campaign is an art. Everyone's not good at it. And so people who defend every single thing that the Democratic Party does do defend things like this, the vetoing of that bill. And so I hope that they hear that message that like we shouldn't accept
They're wrong.
partial fights.
Do you know how many identities I carry before Democrat?
Right.
Right? So many. In fact, very rarely have I ever identified myself as a Democrat as the primary means or lens by which you should see me. In fact, Prop 50 was probably the first time that I ever politically was like, look, this is about who we are and who they are. But I think the people of this country don't define themselves by their political party first and only either. And so folks who do are definitely the highest turnout folks. They're the delegates you need to make sure are active and engaged and care, but they are not how you win major elections. They are not how you push major campaigns. You've got to reach the folks who don't identify first as a Democrat. Maybe somewhere in the collection of ways that they see themselves they do, or maybe they're thinking about it because they're not sure which party is serving them effectively. That's who you really need to be speaking to. And the way you speak to those folks is by staying consistent, by staying rooted in the struggles that everyday people are facing, staying authentic, and sometimes just ignoring the polling when you know that something is right.
Yeah. And so wrapping up on this, Governor Gavin Newsom has another year in office. So you do have hope that given some pressure in the next legislative session that he will reconsider.
Like I said, the governor's a good guy. His heart is in the right place. I think he made a mistake on this. I would tell him that. He knows that's how I feel. But I think there's a lot of good work to do, and you have to know who the real enemies are. And if you stop collaborating and working with folks because they let you down one time or even two times, then you're going to miss out on the opportunities to really do some good. And I see another year with Governor Newsom where we can really still do some good. So I'm gonna talk my shit. I'm gonna be honest, and he would expect nothing less. But we've got more work to do, and when we start to craft our package for next year, we might not bring that exact same bill back, but we're gonna bring legislation that we know improves the conditions of life, centers the real struggles people are facing, tries to right the historical wrongs and injustices in this country. That's what we're gonna do, and we're expecting him to step in with us.
Governor Gavin Newsom has been receiving a ton of attention across the country for the way that he's taking on Donald Trump, mirroring Donald Trump back to him. Is that an effective strategy? And like, do you think that there's something else that Governor Gavin Newsom should be doing in addition to that?
I think that it is an effective strategy, but it's a short-term strategy. And I think our pathway to governance and regaining power in this country is to also remind folks the best of who we are. So if you're mirroring him too much, you start to lose at a certain point a little bit of the grace, a little bit of the decorum, a little bit of the decency and humanity that makes people look up to certain figures in history. And folks like Barack Obama, folks like the presidents who we hold to the highest regard, many of them were very tough and definitely had their pointed moments, but also led with tremendous grace and stature. And so I just want to make sure we don't get too deep in the mud, that we forget to shower off and remind folks what leadership really looks like. You still need the Dr. King model. You still need John Lewis's in the world. You still need folks who just rise above the fray and lead. But that doesn't mean you should be afraid of the fight. And I think right now we're in the fight. So do that, but don't lose yourself.
It was announced that Nancy Pelosi, former Speaker of the House, will be retiring after 20 terms in Congress. She won't be seeking re-election. What do you make of that decision from her? She didn't, in her announcement, make any sort of statement that was like, this is because of XYZ reasons. She just said, hey, I'm not doing this anymore. She delivered a really nice video about San Francisco and how much it has meant for her to represent the city. Do you think that she is retiring, in your own personal opinion, because she's just done, or do you think that she wants to see younger leaders step up?
I hope it's the latter.
Right.
I think everybody, when you start to really think about your legacy, it's not actually the things that you accomplished. It's what the people who come after you say about the things that you accomplished. And so building a bench, investing in the next generation, I think that's critical for anybody who wants to make a lasting impact on this country. And Nancy Pelosi has served the nation for a very long time and has decided now is the time to pass the torch. She passed the gavel to Hakeem Jeffries several years back, so we knew this was coming. And I think coming off the heels of Prop 50,
she did file.
yeah,
She did file to run in 2026, and she's
You know,
gotten a ton of pushback.
they always say, don't let them know your next move, right?
Yeah.
Until you know your next move. And I know it's also very difficult to leave a seat that has no term limits. I mean, folks like to die in office, as crazy as it is, instead of getting ready for the next person. And so I saw her recently at one of the Prop 50 press conferences. We had a brief conversation. She's still as sharp as she's ever been. I mean, there's no misstep. So I think to go out while you're still relatively on top, especially after Prop 50, I think shows a lot of courage and grace, and wish her the best in the next chapter.
I personally have a lot of criticisms of folks who believe that it is ageist to say that leaders should prepare to step down eventually. I think that there should be a roadmap that you lay out for yourself as a leader that says this is the benchmark I'm trying to pass, and then I'll be done. Because today online, in addition, in response to her, I said that a lot of older leaders or people who have been serving in Congress for forever go under the radar, and the people who get the pressure are high profile Democrats like a Nancy Pelosi or a Chuck Schumer. But there are so many members that people don't even, I think about. So Marcy Kaptur holds the record for the longest serving woman in Congress, 22 terms at 79 years old, and is running for re-election, which means that at the end of her 23rd term, she'll be about 84 years old.
Yeah.
And the response that I get from people is that, well, she's progressive. She's a progressive Democrat.
Okay.
Raul Grijalva was also a progressive Democrat, but he died in office, and Arizona has gone without a voice for 8 months now. So I don't know. Do you think that the conversation around like term limits or age limits is ageist?
I think it's hard to have a conversation around age limits and it not be ageist. But I think term limits
People can't drive after a certain age. You know what I mean?
I know a dude who's 100 years old right now. I had lunch with him the other day, who is driving his red car still, and he's sharp. And he was telling me a story from the 1940s about how he used to sell watermelon off the back of a truck in downtown Los Angeles.
That's great, and I'm so happy for that man. But I don't want him writing bills. You know what I mean? Because I'm a parent. My kid is gonna be 13 in 3 weeks, and like my kid has to exist in this world.
That's right.
So the people who are writing laws by which his will dictate his life,
Right.
I think should be of this generation at least.
I don't disagree. I mean, I got elected when I was 29. I'm 33 now. I'm the youngest member of the California Legislative Black Caucus. Even now, I'm one of the youngest state legislators in the country. And I believe you have to pass the torch. I don't think we should have to pry it from your cold, dead hands. I think succession planning, vision planning, building the bench, those are necessary components of leadership. And to truly be an effective leader, you have to constantly be thinking about what comes after you and when. And the when has to be when the next generation can make the biggest impact. You've got to pass that in full stride. You don't stop running and then hand the baton, right? Yeah. You keep the race moving. And I think that's something a lot of folks in Congress could learn from today. But I think it's something that the newer generation is mindful of as we start to get going. I know I am. I'm already thinking about what comes next for me in the state legislature, what comes after me, because I'm about halfway through the 12-year term limits that I've got. And it's not just about accomplishing what I can and then leaving it behind empty-handed. We've got to build talent. We've got to cultivate talent. It's part of why we run into a problem anytime there's a crisis and we recycle the same names. Like there aren't people all across the country doing amazing work, new leaders, exciting leaders. Who knew about Mamdani before 8 months ago, right? Somebody did. and people in New York did, but he certainly didn't have the visibility and platform that he probably should have had, given how incredibly talented this brother
He went on
is.
a 15-day hunger strike in 2021 with taxi drivers.
It's
15 days.
What's so crazy is when you start to meet, kind of an emerging generation of leaders, you're like, oh wait, you've been doing this shit a while. We just didn't know. Nobody knew. And the reality is somebody knew, and they wanted to keep you contained until they were ready to move aside. And you shouldn't have to break your way in. It should be something that we are actively feeding and encouraging, because if we don't, we will lose like we just did.
Yeah. And I think, I've been working closely with Mamdani, and, he was elected 2 days ago. And I'm kind of sad the election's over. It was a nice couple of months, but seeing the energy that he brought, I personally am so baffled by the Democratic establishment's reluctance to just support him. You don't endorse every person's individual policy idea because you support them, but he is the Democratic candidate. He won. And so for a party that is struggling with young people, when you see people all across the country wishing that they could vote for him, when you see that kind of enthusiasm, I am shocked to see the Democratic Party not want to get behind that.
It's goofy. It's ridiculous.
And if he is not at the 2028 DNC, I don't understand what they're going to be doing.
He literally won the Democratic nominee. He didn't run third party. In fact, he forced other Democrats to go third party and independent and MAGA. They went everywhere but the Democratic Party because he locked that thing up. So to not support him or to wait until the last week was a little bit goofy and ridiculous in my opinion. To not show up to his victory. This is the biggest city in the country. And it's a top-down mayoral structure. People say he's not going to be able to execute that. He's going to be able to execute on some things because the mayor of New York has some real power and authority.
He has brought along some of the most incredible experts on policy and economics.
And he's sincere.
Yeah.
You can feel it.
I've been with Mamdani at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'm telling you that is not a front.
Yeah. No, I've never met dude, but you can feel it coming off of him. It is authentic. It is genuine. It is real. Does that mean he's going to be able to do everything he wants all the time? No, that's not how politics work.
Right.
That's not how governance work. But you run on a vision, and you spend every day trying to execute that vision. And when you leave, you've done as much as you can to have done that. And hopefully the conditions of life where you've served are better. And I think folks will be better in New York because of him. And we shouldn't be throwing up roadblocks as fellow Democrats, especially if you are Democratic leaders in New York. You should be doing all you can to help him execute that vision because it is the vision that New Yorkers clearly want.
Do you think that Democrats, hopefully, if they see that his star in politics is not going to dwindle anytime soon, he's really just getting started. His message was about working class people.
Yeah.
It was about affordability, which Trump yesterday said was a new word. Do you think that Democrats will realize, again, like we said earlier, we need working class people in governance, but working class people also elect people?
Right.
Do you think that they will really lean into listening to the concerns of working class people? Because I feel like so often Democrats love to just take a policy idea and sanitize it through, all of these different political machines and getting everyone's opinion on it, and then it becomes nothing by the time they present it to the people.
That's my biggest concern. Also, when we're talking about affordability, we're forgetting some of the components of that, right? The rent is too high. People are earning too little. Wealth growth is faster than income growth. Hard work doesn't get you ahead right now. In fact, some of the people who are working the hardest jobs in this country are being paid the least. We have to be really honest about what is all baked in to that affordability conversation. And I know it feels like a new word to Donald Trump. Groceries was a new word to him just a few years ago.
He made it up.
He still can't stay acetaminophen. So I wish him the best of luck in growing his vocabulary.
He said you need ID to buy bread.
That's wild. I can't imagine this man buying a loaf of bread. I can't imagine him doing a lot of things. I could have never imagined him leading this country. But I think if the Democratic Party doesn't lean in to the real concerns of everyday people, the struggles that folks are facing, doesn't lean into the next generation, doesn't lean into social media and digital strategies and understanding the way new media is shaping new narratives and start to let authenticity rise to the top instead of holding it down until you're ready to give it its turn. And oftentimes, after you've left this earth, we've got changes we've got to make. And I hope the party is willing to embrace that and see that through that, there is also political success. You shouldn't have political success be your guidepost. You should have the people be your guidepost, and then you will find political success.
Yeah, that's a great point. And you mentioned earlier that we shouldn't be circling back to the same figures over and over, hoping that they're the ones who save us.
We sent Bill Clinton to Michigan.
I met President Barack Obama a couple days ago.
Yeah.
And he was at a rally, and I remember in the middle of his remarks, someone yelled, "Obama 2028." And everyone looked at this person like, "Are you okay?" That you think that this is nothing to do with Barack Obama,
Right?
Nothing even to do with the Constitution. But do you really think that are we out of ideas?
Right. And people?
Like, I don't understand this. And then the conversations every 4 years about Michelle Obama, who lady wants leave her alone.
That same person who would say Obama 2028 was a Hillary delegate in 2016.
Right.
Right? That you've got to open the door for something exciting to come through. And that is exactly how we saw a young Barack Obama out of Chicago, who nobody knew who he was.
We should listen to these voices early on. Someone that I keep my eye on is Governor Wes Moore.
Yeah.
And Governor Wes Moore has been on the scene, and a lot of people don't know him.
Right.
But he was at the 2004 Democratic National Convention.
Right.
He spoke before Obama did. These people have been around. They have
That's
been
right.
fighting and speaking. So I hope that people pay attention. We are running out of time. So I did want to chat a little bit. You mentioned what's up for you in the future.
Yeah.
We know that Prop 50 passed, and
Yeah.
there will be new districts.
Yeah.
There is always a conversation about people who gain recognition, who are seen as fighters, and then we automatically assume that they should want to ascend to the
Right.
next step, that they should be doing something else. But I know that representing your community here in California, it is deeply personal to you to be here.
Right.
Do you think that it is best suited for you to remain in the assembly, finish out your 12 terms, or is there even an idea for you of running for the House of Representatives?
I think doing the best job that I can every day is what motivates me and inspires me. A California State Assembly member represents 500,000 Californians. A Congress member in California represents just over 700,000. And so we serve the same constituency, and I feel very effective at the state level. If you're in Congress and you pass one bill in your entire time, you have done something miraculous. I had 12 bills signed by the governor this last year that really improved the conditions of life for people in the community. We brought millions of dollars down in state funding for projects and resources in the neighborhood. I'm very, very proud of that. But I will go wherever the people call me. If a seat opens up and folks believe that it is the right thing for me, then I will listen to that call. But I'm not chasing seats. I'm not chasing titles. I'm chasing impact. And right now we're doing something really powerful. The community is with us, and we're going to keep on doing that.
All right, I'll take that answer. It's not the answer I wanted to hear, but it's no. I wish that we could have more voices like yours in Congress, but you're great to watch. It's great to watch you fight. And I hope that there are people across the country, those who are in office, those who are thinking of running for office, who are watching you and taking notes.
I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of good work still to do.
Yeah. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.